Hi ceramic students. In this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a pinch pot out of ball clay. Okay, before I begin this demonstration, there's just a couple of things that I would like to go over before I start. So some things to keep in mind. Number one, clay is gonna dry your hands out. And as the clay is drying your hands out, your hands are also drying the clay out. And what we're gonna learn the more we work with clay is that the softer the clay, the easier, the more malleable, the more plastic, the better it's going to be for us to build with or to construct with. So there's a few things that we can do to help prevent our clay from drying out. Number one, whenever we are not using our clay, it should be wrapped in a plastic bag. So even if it's just a little section of your garbage bag wrapped around it so that it's not drying out. Number two, keep our hands from being dry. Now, it's important that we don't use lotion, okay? So no lotion on our hands before working with clay. After working with clay, if you want, you may put lotion on. But what we'll use instead is just water. So if you are working with clay in class, there's a spray bottle at your table with water that you can spray on your hands a little bit to help add moisture back into your hands. You can also walk over to the sink, get a little bit of water on your hands and rub it in like it were lotion, okay? So you're adding water to your hands like it were lotion. If you're working at home, maybe you have a bucket that you can use or a cup or some sort of a container that you can add some water into. I just have mine in a bucket sitting near my workspace. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to dip my hands into my bucket. I don't want too much water on my hands, but just enough to keep my hands from drying out. So I'm gonna rub the water in until my hands feel less dry, okay? All right, the next thing that we're gonna do with our pinch pot. So when you get your clay, it's gonna look like this. This is not an ideal shape or form rather for a pinch pot. If we tried to start with this, we wouldn't get very far, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of squish the clay into more of a sphere form, okay? So I'm gonna take the clay and I'm gonna smush it. I'm gonna use my muscles, I'm gonna smush it into a round form, okay? As you're smushing the clay, you're kind of loosening up that plasticity of this clay, okay? You're gonna make it a little bit easier to work with, but you gotta be really careful of something. We can't overwork the clay. If we handle this clay too much, it's gonna start drying out, and then we're gonna get a lot of cracks as we start building or start pinching our pinch pots, okay? So I'm gonna take a minute and I'm going to pat this into a little bit more of a circle. I might also use my table here and kind of do some rolling. Okay, so that didn't take me very long and I didn't spend too much time doing this because I wanna make sure my clay doesn't dry out before I start pinching it, okay? So I have my clay pretty round. It's not a perfect circle, but it doesn't have to be. The next thing that I have to do for mine and what I want you to do for yours also is inspect it for little creases in the clay. So you're gonna see like right here, I have some creases in the clay. And as if I look around, I'm gonna notice there's a few more here and there. We're gonna blend those in with our fingers so that we don't see them anymore. If we don't do this, if we don't blend, so I'm gonna kind of blend and just kind of pull the clay. If we skip this step, those creases that are in the clay can turn to cracks, which will be hard to fix later. So I'm gonna take a minute to get rid of all of my little wrinkles and creases in the clay. Okay, so the first step, well, actually, before the first step, the whole time we're forming our pinch pot, you want to make sure that you're holding the mass of clay in one of your hands. Now, if you're a right-handed person, I would recommend holding your clay in your left hand and pinching with your right. If you're left-handed, hold it in your right hand and pinch with your left. So I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna hold my clay in my left hand, and I'm gonna look over the top of my clay and I'm gonna find the center of it. I'm gonna make just a little mark so that you can see, okay? So I'm finding the center of my mass of clay. Now, using my thumb, I'm going to, if I turn this sideways so that you can see, okay? So you're gonna be holding yours straight up and down like this, but so that you can actually see what I'm doing, I'm gonna hold mine at the side, okay? So your clay is gonna be in your non-dominant hand and you're pinching with your dominant hand. I am gonna push my thumb towards my palm until I'm about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom of the clay where it's sitting in my palm. Okay, so as I do this, I've got to use some pressure, and I've got to kind of push. And if you're having a hard time, try turning your hand a little bit and then pushing, and then turn your hand a little bit more, and this just kind of helps to get down a little bit further. Now, when you get to the point where you'll be able to almost feel your thumb on your palm. Okay, so I can feel my thumb kind of hitting my palm. I'm gonna stop when I feel that because I gotta be very careful. I don't want my thumb to go through the bottom of my pinch pot. So I would say my thumb is come to about right here. If you were able to see on the inside, if I were to draw like a little line, it's about that far from the bottom, okay? So about a 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom. Now, when we start pinching, we're only gonna be using our fingers and our thumb on the inside. Your thumb has to stay straight. So you wanna keep your thumb as straight as possible down inside of your pinch pot. Your fingers are gonna curl around the side of your pinch pot to the bottom like this, okay? Now, your hand right here especially is gonna dry out fast through this process. So I'm gonna take a little bit of water and just put it right here on my hand so that it's not sticking and so my hand's not drying out my clay. Now, as I start pinching, I'm only gonna pinch the bottom. So just the very bottom of my pinch pot, okay? So my thumb on the inside is not gonna go up past here, all right? And my fingers on the outside are not gonna pinch past here. Now, as you start pinching, try not to open up your rim. So this has to stay as small as possible up here, okay? Now, you wanna turn the clay a little bit as you go. It's gonna kind of be hard because the angle your thumb has to go in, so do this part slowly, okay? So I'm gonna start by just taking a few minutes to pinch my bottom. Okay, one other thing, while I'm pinching my bottom, I'm also feeling the walls. So you've got to kind of like be quiet and think about what's happening on the inside of your pinch pot because you can't see it. You have to rely on your sense of touch, okay? So right now, my walls all feel like they're pretty much the same thickness from the bottom to about right here. Okay, so that's what I want. So once I have a 1/4 of an inch thickness on the bottom, I can start moving up. So we're gonna do this in rings, okay? So if you can imagine, there's a ring at the bottom, there's a ring a little bit above that, and as we go up, there's gonna be these rings of clay. And as we move up, we're gonna pinch each ring individually. And what's gonna happen is the force of us pinching that clay has to go somewhere. So it's gonna start moving upward, okay? That's how we're gonna get our pinch pots to be taller than they are wide. It's very important, again, that we don't open up this top part. So my bottom's ready to go. I'm gonna add a little bit more water to my hands here so that I don't dry out the clay. And I'm gonna move my hands up. So inside and outside have to work together, okay? So I'm gonna move my thumb and my fingers up about 1/4 of an inch on the inside of my pinch pot. I still have to make sure I'm cradling the bottom of my pinch pot in my other hand. And I'm gonna slowly start to pinch that second ring of clay until it's the same thickness as the bottom. So I'm gonna take a minute or so to pinch my clay to make it equal with the bottom. And I'm taking care to not open up my ring. That's my rim, I'm sorry. That's the biggest mistake people make, is right here. Go slow, take your time, rely on your sense of touch. Feel the clay, feel how thick it is. Now, at this point, you're gonna see here in just a second that I have my second ring done, okay? Now, hopefully you're able to tell this, but do you notice how the clay is starting to kind of bulge in and then out? That is because that's what we want it to look like. It's gonna start going inward as we pull the clay up. Okay, so the clay is moving because it needs to go somewhere, all right? All right, so once I have that second ring of clay or area of clay pinched, I'm gonna move up a little bit more. So I'm moving up like another 1/2 inch. I did just add a little bit of water to my clay. Don't add too much. You could just do like a light dusting like this of water on your clay just to help to keep some moisture in the clay as you're working. Your clay should not be sticky or gooey or anything like that. If you add too much water, it's gonna be hard to go backwards, okay? So I'm just gonna continue. Again, my thumb on the inside and my fingers are staying together throughout this whole thing. So they have to move together, okay? And again, I'm holding the clay in my hand so that the bottom stays round. Now, at this point, I saw a lot of you when you were doing your pre-instruction pinch pots. At this point, a lot of people were getting a lot of cracks in your clay. So let's talk about that right now. I see a few little surface cracks that are starting to form in my clay here. If these start to open up, little cracks like that, take care to blend them in as soon as you see them. So I'm just gonna go over that with my fingers a little bit and blend it in. Just be careful of one thing. You don't want to blend too much, okay? It's okay for these to be a little bit rough. These are meant to look like they're made by hand. They're not going to be perfect. We want them to have that feel of being pinched, okay? So we just don't want any surface cracks. This thing does not have to be super duper smooth. It can be just a little bit lumpy to give it some personality, okay? So, I see a few of them opening up towards my rim. Those I definitely want to take care of because remember, those are going to stretch as we start to move up a little bit more. So I'm just going to take a minute to deal with some surface cracks. All right, so right now my pinch pot is not done, but let's say I need a break, okay? If I were needing to step away from this for a minute, one of the requirements for our pinch pot is that it has a rounded bottom, okay? And that's why we've been holding it in the palm of our hand. So if I were to walk away from my pinch pot, I'm gonna wanna let it sit down on its rim so that I don't smush my bottom. It's really hard to round the bottom back out if you flatten it, okay? So since I have mine sitting, I'm just gonna put some more water on my hands before I continue pinching. Now, the pinch pot is not done until the walls are an even thickness, okay? So right now, my walls are still way too thick up at the top. This is way thicker than it needs to be. So we need to get it down to about this, about half that size or a third of that thickness, okay? So I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna put my thumb back into the pinch pot and I'm gonna find where I left off, which I'm about right here now. Now this is the tricky part. Once you get closer to the top, people's projects, I see a lot of this happen, that the projects start to like fan outward almost, and we don't want that to happen. So if you don't want your walls to fan outward, The reason that's happening is if you're pinching and you're pulling your thumb this way towards the outside while you're pinching, you're gonna open up that rim too much. So as you're pinching, especially when you get to the top, try to have your thumb pulling this way. So you're always pulling towards the inside of that pinch pot. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more water and then continue pinching. And make sure that you're always kind of feeling what you did below to make sure your thickness is even throughout. This will also help your rim to be an even thickness as well. So you're gonna notice that my rim is starting to open up a little bit more. As you get to the top, that's okay. Your rim's gonna open up a little bit more. And at this point, since we don't have to have our thumb straight up and down inside of it, if you wanna switch hands, you can. The most important thing though is that you keep your walls an equal thickness. Be very careful as you start to get to the rim. This is where most cracks are gonna form. So you're gonna see, if you look at mine real quick, I have a few little cracks forming. Before they get any bigger, I want to blend them in. So as soon as I see a little crack opening up, I'm gonna blend it in with my finger, and I go both ways, especially if one opens up really thick. Don't wait until the very end to take care of those cracks, or they'll be really hard to fill back in. When you get to the rim, be very gentle, okay? Make sure you're feeling that it's the same thickness as below. And again, take care of any surface cracks that start to open up. I also am gonna take a little bit of time to check for any surface cracks anywhere else on my pinch pot. And if I see any, to take care to fill them in. Okay, so once you have your pinch pot formed and it looks to be the same thickness throughout, it shouldn't be heavy on the bottom, you can be done, but you're gonna wanna go through and just make it as smooth as you can, but with it still having, you know, a little bit of character to it, okay? So I'm just gonna take a few more minutes, just kind of smooth out some of the lumps. We are going to be carving one of our pinch pots that we make. So the one, especially the one that we carve, we don't want a lot of lumps in it. It will make it difficult to carve into if your walls are really uneven. So there can be a little bit of lumpiness, but just not a lot, because it will be difficult. Okay. And voila, I have a constructed pinch pot that is taller than it is wide. Now, when we store these, if you didn't finish, okay, so this is almost finished, but not completely finished. It still needs a foot on it. But if we're not finished and we still need to do something to our pinch pot, you are going to take some paper towel, not a lot. We just want to keep the moisture retained in the clay. So I'm just going to take a small piece of paper towel and I'm going to get it wet. I'm just going to use my bucket of clay so you guys can see here. So I'm going to get my piece of paper towel completely wet in the water. So we want the paper towel completely saturated in water, but we don't want it dripping, okay? So if I tried to add this to the clay, when I come back to it later, it's gonna be mush, okay? Because there's way too much water in this paper towel. So I'm gonna go ahead and squeeze as much of the water out of the paper towel as possible, okay? So just a damp paper towel that's not dripping, that has as much of the water out of it as you were able to get. You're just gonna lay it, let me move this over here. You're just gonna lay it around your pinch pot. It's gonna stay on its rim. You're gonna put this into your bag, whatever type of a bag you might be using. I just have a plastic grocery bag. I'm gonna place this into my bag. And then I'm going to wrap my bag around my pinch pot like this, so that the open part of the bag, I like to twist it a little bit too. So the open part of the bag is kind of sitting underneath my pinch pot, and it can just stay in my bag. I will then, if I'm in class, store this back in my cabinet. If I'm at home, I will find a place where it won't get smushed or destroyed until next class. In the next video, I will show you how to add a foot to your pinch pot. Thank you guys.